In July 2024, a discovery at Yellowstone's Norris Geyser Basin would finally answer questions that had haunted investigators for 29 years. Record drought conditions had exposed what park rangers initially thought was just old camping debris. But when they spotted a film canister sealed in waterproof plastic, buried precisely where 3 geology students had their last campfire in 1995, they knew this wasn't ordinary litter. The canister contained undeveloped film that would reveal the truth about one of the park's most baffling disappearances. Before we begin the story, write in the comments which city you're from. We're very interested to know where you're watching our video from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your rating. The morning of July 15, 1995, started like any other summer day at Yellowstone. Kevin Martinez, a 22-year-old graduate student from the University of Montana, was leading a research expedition to study the unique geological features of Norris Geyser Basin. Known for his meticulous documentation habits, Kevin photographed everything. His professors often joked that he spent more on film than food. That attention to detail would prove crucial decades later. Kevin wasn't alone on this trip. 2 other geology students accompanied him, forming a small but enthusiastic research team. They had permits, proper equipment, and had filed all necessary paperwork with the Park Service. The 3 had been planning this expedition for months, excited about the potential findings for their thesis projects. Theodore Blackwood, 24, was Kevin's closest academic rival. Both were competing for the same prestigious research grant that would fund their doctoral studies. The competition had grown increasingly tense over the spring semester. 3 days before the Yellowstone trip, witnesses at the university library heard them arguing. "That's my research interpretation, and you know it," Ted had said, his voice carrying across the quiet study area. Kevin had responded calmly but firmly that scientific data belonged to whoever could best analyze it. The 3rd member of their group often went unnoticed in these academic disputes, preferring to focus on the work rather than the politics. This tendency to stay in the background would later prove significant. When the students arrived at Yellowstone on July 14th, they checked in at the west entrance and drove directly to their designated camping area near Norris Geyser Basin. The site was popular with researchers due to its proximity to some of the park's most thermally active features. They set up their tents efficiently, organized their equipment, and prepared for several days of intensive field work. That evening, they encountered Lucas Harper, a 23-year-old local who worked as a wilderness guide. Lucas offered his services, mentioning he knew all the hidden spots around the geyser basin that even experienced researchers might miss. "Been guiding in these parts since I was 18, he said with a confident smile. The students politely declined, explaining they had specific research protocols to follow. Lucas seemed to take the rejection well, wishing them luck before heading off. Unknown to the students, there was more to Lucas than his friendly demeanor suggested. Among the routine paperwork later found in the investigation files was a detail everyone initially overlooked: a guide permit with an expiration date of July 14, 1995, the day before the students arrived. The morning of July 15th began with Kevin taking photographs, as usual. His camera captured the sunrise over the geyser basin, the steam rising from thermal features, and his companions preparing breakfast. The last timestamp visible on his camera showed 8:15 p.m. that evening, a group photo of all 3 students around their campfire, smiling and seemingly relaxed. Ranger Patricia Chen was 28 years old and had worked at Yellowstone for 4 years. She knew the Norris area better than most, having conducted countless patrols through its boardwalks and backcountry trails. What few people knew was that Patricia had met Kevin Martinez 3 weeks earlier during a permit review. They had exchanged phone numbers, ostensibly to discuss research protocols. The calls had become increasingly personal. Patricia's patrol schedule for July 15th placed her in Sector 7, the opposite end of the geyser basin from the students' campsite. Her official log showed routine observations, tourist counts, thermal feature temperatures, wildlife sightings. Nothing unusual. She would later insist she never deviated from her assigned route that evening. The students' research focused on mineral deposits around thermal features, requiring them to work close to potentially dangerous areas. Park regulations mandated specific safety protocols, which Kevin documented thoroughly in his field notebook. Pages 1 through 46 contained detailed observations, sketches, and measurements from their first day's work. The notebook would later be found at the campsite, but pages 47 through 52 were missing, leaving a gap in the record of their final hours. As evening approached on July 15th, the camp settled into a routine. They had collected samples, recorded data, and photographed various formations. Ted Blackwood's geology hammer, a specialized tool he'd owned since his undergraduate days, bore the scratches and wear of extensive field use. He was particular about his equipment, always cleaning it thoroughly after each day's work. Lucas Harper appeared again around 7 p.m., ostensibly hiking through the area. He stopped to chat with the students, asking about their research. Kevin, always polite but focused on his work, showed Lucas some of their preliminary findings. Lucas seemed particularly interested in their planned schedule for the next few days, asking detailed questions about which thermal features they intended to study. The West Yellowstone General Store would later produce a receipt showing Lucas purchased camping supplies at 9:27 p.m. that evening. The items included rope, a tarp, and cleaning supplies. Lucas would claim he was stocking up for his next guide job, though he couldn't produce any booking confirmations for upcoming trips. By 10 p.m. on July 15th, the Norris Geyser Basin had settled into its nighttime rhythm. The tourist crowds were gone, leaving only the sounds of bubbling thermal features and occasional wildlife. The students' campfire had burned down to embers, creating a small circle of warmth in the cool mountain air. Kevin made one final entry in his journal, though what he wrote on those missing pages would remain unknown for nearly 3 decades. At 10:47 p.m., something happened at that campsite. The exact nature of events would become the subject of intense speculation and investigation. What investigators knew for certain was that by the morning of July 18th, when Ranger Chen conducted her scheduled patrol of the camping area, she found 3 abandoned tents, cold fire rings, and equipment scattered as if the occupants had left suddenly. The students' van remained in the parking area, keys still in Kevin's tent. The initial search was extensive. Park rangers, local law enforcement, and volunteers combed the area around Norris Geyser Basin. The thermal features made the search particularly challenging and dangerous. Some areas simply couldn't be accessed safely. After 2 weeks with no signs of the students, the search was scaled back. After a month, it was suspended. The case remained open, but cold. Every few years, someone would pull the file, review the evidence, and find no new leads. The students' families pushed for answers, hired private investigators, and appeared on missing persons programs. Ted Blackwood's mother would call the Park Service every July 15th, asking if anything new had been discovered. Lucas Harper proved helpful during the initial investigation. He provided detailed statements about his interactions with the students, expressed genuine concern for their well-being, and even volunteered for search parties. His guide experience made him valuable in suggesting areas to search. When investigators verified his alibi, the receipt from West Yellowstone seemed to place him miles away during the crucial window. Ranger Patricia Chen was devastated by the disappearance. She blamed herself for not checking on the students that evening, even though it wasn't her sector. Her colleagues noticed she became withdrawn, obsessive about patrol safety. She requested a transfer 6 months later, moving to a different national park. Some whispered about her relationship with Kevin, but without proof, it remained rumor. The geology department at the University of Montana held a memorial service 6 months after the disappearance. Ted Blackwood's academic advisor spoke about his promising future, his dedication to science. The research grant both Ted and Kevin had competed for was awarded posthumously to a joint scholarship fund in their names. It seemed a tragic end to a senseless rivalry. For 29 years, the case file gathered dust. New rangers would occasionally hear the story, a cautionary tale about the dangers of Yellowstone's thermal features. Some theorized the students had ventured too close to a hot spring at night. Others suggested wildlife encounters. Without evidence, without remains, there were only theories. Then came the drought of 2024. Climate change and reduced snowpack had left Yellowstone's water features at historic lows. Areas usually submerged or inaccessible became exposed. On July 20, 2024, a park maintenance crew working near the old campsite noticed something unusual in what had been a seasonal pool. The receding water had revealed objects that clearly didn't belong to the natural landscape. The maintenance crew's discovery triggered an immediate response from park law enforcement. What they found in that dried seasonal pool wasn't just random camping gear. Carefully preserved in waterproof containers were items that had been deliberately hidden. The film canister was just the beginning. There was also a Coleman lantern with peculiarly melted glass, fragments of what appeared to be torn notebook pages, and a digital watch stopped at exactly 10:47 p.m. The Park Service contacted the FBI, who still had jurisdiction over the cold case. Special Agent Diana Morrison, who specialized in cold cases involving national parks, arrived within 24 hours. Morrison had seen dozens of old cases reopened due to new evidence, but rarely did drought conditions provide such a perfectly preserved crime scene. The film from Kevin's canister required careful processing. After nearly 3 decades, there was no guarantee the images would be recoverable. The FBI lab in Quantico worked for 3 days using specialized techniques. When the photographs finally emerged, they provided an unprecedented window into July 15, 1995. The photos showed typical field research documentation, rock formations, thermal pools, mineral deposits. But the background details told a different story. In 17 of the 36 photos, a figure could be seen watching from various distances. The image quality made identification difficult, but the clothing was consistent. A khaki jacket and dark cap that Lucas Harper had been wearing when he spoke with investigators in 1995. Agent Morrison pulled the original case files, reading through hundreds of pages of interviews and evidence logs. She noticed something previous investigators had overlooked or deemed unimportant. Lucas Harper's guide permit had expired the day before the students arrived. This meant he was operating illegally when he offered his services. It seemed like a minor infraction, but Morrison knew that small lies often concealed larger ones. The melted Coleman lantern glass provided another puzzle piece. Initial analysis suggested the melting pattern was inconsistent with a normal campfire accident. The heat required would have been extreme and focused, more consistent with an accelerant being used. Someone had deliberately overfueled that campfire, creating an intense blaze that would destroy evidence. Morrison tracked down Patricia Chen, now 57, and working as a ranger at Grand Canyon National Park. Patricia was reluctant to revisit that summer, but eventually agreed to an interview. She admitted to the relationship with Kevin, something she'd hidden in 1995 for fear of losing her job. "We'd only known each other 3 weeks," she said, "but there was something special developing. Kevin was supposed to call me that night after his team finished their evening observations. He never did." The interview revealed another crucial detail. Patricia's original patrol log from July 15, 1995, had discrepancies. She claimed she was in Sector 7, but vehicle logs from the park's then-new GPS tracking system showed her patrol vehicle much closer to Sector 4, near the students' campsite, between 10:30 and 11:15 p.m. When Morrison confronted her with this information, Patricia broke down. "I did drive by their campsite," she admitted. "I wanted to see Kevin just for a minute, but when I got close, I saw someone else there. Someone was at their fire. I assumed it was one of the other students, so I left. I didn't want to seem like I was checking up on him. When they disappeared, I was terrified people would think I had something to do with it, so I changed my patrol log. Morrison pressed for details about the figure Patricia saw. It was dark, just a silhouette by the fire, but something seemed wrong. The person was moving things around, almost frantically. I thought maybe they were just organizing equipment. Now I realized they might have been searching for something. The torn notebook pages found in the dried pool provided the next breakthrough. Though partially degraded, forensic analysis revealed indentations from Kevin's writing. Using specialized imaging technology, investigators recovered fragments of his final entry. Harper knows. Expired permit. Threatened to report. Getting aggressive. The receipt from West Yellowstone, long considered Lucas Harper's alibi, now deserved closer scrutiny. Morrison discovered that the store's timestamp system in 1995 had a known issue, running approximately 45 minutes slow. This meant Lucas's 9:27 p.m. purchase actually occurred around 10:12 p.m., giving him a much smaller alibi window. Morrison's team located Ted Blackwood's geology hammer among the recovered evidence. It bore traces of a specific mineral combination found only near one thermal feature in the Norris Basin, a dangerous area called Devil's Throat. This location was off-limits to researchers and wouldn't have been on the students' official route. Someone had taken that hammer there after the students disappeared. The investigation now focused on Lucas Harper. Morrison discovered he hadn't simply left the area after 1995. He'd stayed in West Yellowstone for another 3 years, building a reputation as a helpful local guide. Then, in 1998, he'd abruptly moved to Alaska. His departure coincided with new federal regulations requiring background checks for all guide permits in national parks. Finding Lucas after 29 years proved challenging. He'd lived under the radar, working cash jobs, avoiding official documentation. The trail led through Alaska, Oregon, and finally to a small town in northern Idaho. Lucas Harper, now 52, worked as a maintenance supervisor at a lumber mill. He'd never married, lived alone, and kept to himself. When Morrison and local law enforcement arrived at Lucas's residence, they found a man who looked older than his years. The house was sparse, functional, with one notable exception. A detailed map of Yellowstone still hung on his living room wall, marked with dozens of pins and notations. Lucas initially maintained his innocence, sticking to the story he'd told in 1995. But when Morrison presented the recovered film, showing him watching the students, the expired permit, and Kevin's journal fragments, his composure cracked. He requested a lawyer, but seemed almost relieved the truth was finally emerging. The next piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. The third geology student, whose name had barely appeared in the original investigation, had left behind a camera of their own. This camera, found in their tent in 1995, had been logged as evidence but never developed, as investigators assumed it contained only geological photos, like Kevin's official camera. When Morrison had this film processed, it revealed crucial images from the evening of July 15th. These photos, time-stamped between 9:45 and 10:30 p.m., showed an escalating confrontation. Lucas Harper was clearly visible in several shots, his body language aggressive, pointing at the students. In one image, he was holding what appeared to be documentation, likely his expired permit. The students looked defensive, with Kevin apparently trying to calm the situation. The digital watch found in the dried pool, stopped at 10:47 p.m., had belonged to Lucas Harper. Morrison confirmed this through purchase records from a West Yellowstone sporting goods store in 1994. The watch's crown had been pulled out, deliberately stopping it, perhaps in an attempt to create a false timeline. Interviews with locals who knew Lucas in 1995 painted a picture of a young man desperate to maintain his guide business. It was his only source of income, his identity, his pride. Lucas lived for those mountains, one former colleague recalled. The thought of losing his guide status would have been devastating. He'd rather die than give that up. Morrison's team conducted ground-penetrating radar surveys around Devil's Throat, the dangerous thermal feature where the geology hammer had been used. The area's extreme temperatures and acidic conditions meant traditional forensic evidence would be long gone, but the survey revealed anomalies consistent with non-geological materials at depths suggesting 1995-era placement. As the investigation progressed, a clearer picture emerged of July 15, 1995. The students had discovered Lucas's expired permit during casual conversation. Kevin, meticulous as always, had mentioned he would need to report it to park authorities. It wasn't malicious, just Kevin's adherence to rules and protocols. But to Lucas, it was a threat to everything he valued. The confrontation had escalated from discussion to argument to something more. The exact sequence of events might never be fully known, but the evidence suggested a sudden, violent conclusion near the campfire. The overfueled fire, the frantic activity Patricia Chen witnessed, the careful disposal of evidence, all pointed to someone trying to cover up an incident that had spiraled out of control. Lucas's receipt for cleaning supplies, rope, and a tarp now took on sinister implications. These items, purchased after the confrontation, suggested a planned cleanup and disposal. The thermal features of Yellowstone, with their extreme heat and acidity, provided a means of evidence destruction that few places on Earth could match. The torn pages from Kevin's journal, the ones Lucas had tried to destroy, contained more than just observations about the expired permit. Kevin had written about his concerns for safety, about Lucas's increasingly erratic behavior during their earlier encounter, about the need to maintain professional distance from potentially dangerous individuals. Morrison's investigation revealed that Lucas had returned to the campsite multiple times in the days following July 15th. Under the guise of helping search efforts, he'd had opportunity to remove or plant evidence. His knowledge of the area's geology made him invaluable to searchers while simultaneously allowing him to direct them away from crucial areas. The film canister's placement was particularly telling. It had been carefully sealed and buried at a specific depth that would preserve it while keeping it hidden unless water levels dropped dramatically. Whether Lucas had hidden it deliberately or lost it during the frantic cleanup remained unclear, but its preservation provided the key to solving the case. The case against Lucas Harper was building, but Morrison needed more than circumstantial evidence for a prosecution after 29 years. She decided to approach the investigation from a different angle, focusing on Lucas's life after 1995. What she discovered revealed a pattern of behavior that supported their theory. In Alaska, Lucas had worked under an assumed name for 2 years, paying cash for everything, avoiding any official documentation. Former co-workers remembered him as paranoid, always looking over his shoulder, never socializing. One recalled finding Lucas burning photographs and documents in 1998, claiming he was leaving the past behind. The move to Idaho had been similarly abrupt. Lucas had abandoned a steady job and a rental cabin in Oregon without notice, leaving behind most of his possessions. His landlord still remembered the strange departure. He left in the middle of the night. Rent was paid up for 2 more months. Left furniture, clothes, everything except a few boxes. Found a bunch of newspaper clippings about Yellowstone in the trash. Morrison obtained a search warrant for Lucas's Idaho home. What they found was a man haunted by the past. In a locked filing cabinet, investigators discovered newspaper clippings about the missing students, printed internet articles about cold cases being solved, and obsessive notes about statute of limitations for various crimes. Most telling was a composition notebook filled with what appeared to be draft letters to Kevin Martinez's family, never sent, dating back years. One entry, dated July 15, 2005, the 10-year anniversary, read, "I think about that night every day. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. They wouldn't listen. They didn't understand what they were taking from me. Everything I was, everything I had, gone because of a piece of paper. If I could take it back." The entry ended mid-sentence. When Morrison presented this evidence to Lucas during interrogation, his lawyer present, she watched him crumble. The weight of 29 years seemed to physically crush him. His lawyer advised him to remain silent, but Lucas seemed beyond caring about legal strategy. "You don't understand what it was like," Lucas finally said, his voice barely audible. "That permit was everything. My grandfather had guided in Yellowstone. My father. It was our family legacy. When the Park Service denied my renewal over a minor infraction, some bureaucratic nonsense about incomplete paperwork, I thought I could just keep working. Who would check?" Morrison let him talk, knowing the confession was being recorded. Lucas continued, "Kevin Martinez was so righteous, so concerned with rules and proper procedure. He looked at my permit, saw the expiration date, and immediately said he'd have to report it. Not could report it, not might report it. Would report it, like it was nothing, like destroying my life was just another checkbox on his research form." The events of July 15, 1995, finally came into focus. Lucas had returned to the campsite that evening, desperate to convince the students not to report him. He'd brought his grandfather's old guide journal, photographs of his family's history in the park, anything to make them understand what was at stake. But Kevin remained unmoved. Rules were rules. The argument got heated, Lucas admitted. Kevin stood up, said he was going to radio the ranger station right then. I grabbed his arm to stop him. He pushed me. I pushed back. He fell backward, hit his head on one of those rocks around the fire pit. There was a sound, a terrible sound. He didn't get up. The other two students had panicked. One ran toward the van, presumably to get help or escape. The other tried to help Kevin. In the chaos and darkness, Lucas claimed, there was a struggle. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone else. I was trying to think, to figure out what to do. But they were screaming, threatening. It all happened so fast. One grabbed Ted's hammer, swung at me. I deflected it, and they stumbled backward, too close to the thermal feature. The ground there, it's not stable. It gave way. The third student had witnessed everything. Lucas caught them near the van. I couldn't let them go. They'd seen too much. But I swear I wasn't planning any of this. It just kept getting worse. Every decision led to something more terrible. The disposal of evidence had been methodical, driven by panic and self-preservation. Lucas used his knowledge of the park's thermal features, particularly Devil's Throat, where the geology hammer had been contaminated with unique minerals. The extreme environment would destroy organic evidence within hours. He'd hidden personal effects that couldn't be destroyed in the seasonal pool, planning to retrieve them later, but never had the opportunity as the area became an active investigation scene. The film canister had been an oversight. Kevin had multiple cameras. I thought I found them all. I burned what I thought was everything. But he must have hidden that one, or it fell during the struggle. When I realized something was missing, it was too late to go back. Lucas's confession filled in the remaining gaps. He'd created his alibi by driving to West Yellowstone, making sure to be seen, buying supplies he thought he might need for cleanup. The timestamp error on the receipt had been pure luck. He'd returned to the campsite after midnight, spent hours ensuring no trace remained, then joined the search efforts to stay informed and misdirect when possible. Patricia Chen's glimpse of someone at the campfire had been Lucas during his initial cleanup. Her decision to alter her patrol logs had inadvertently helped him, removing a potential witness from the timeline. The investigation's focus on Ted Blackwood's academic rivalry with Kevin had provided additional cover. For the first few years, I expected to be caught any day, Lucas confessed. Every knock on the door, every police car, I thought it was over. But as time passed, it seemed like I might have gotten away with it. Except I didn't. Not really. I've been in prison for 29 years, just one of my own making. The prosecutor, reviewing the confession and evidence, faced a challenging decision. 3 counts of murder, even unplanned, carried severe penalties. Lucas's age and the time elapsed complicated matters. There was also the question of recovering the remains from the thermal features, which experts deemed impossible given the environment's destructive nature. The families of the 3 students were notified of the breakthrough. Kevin Martinez's mother, now in her 70s, had never given up hope of finding answers. "It doesn't bring Kevin back," she said through tears, "but knowing what happened, knowing why, it helps. He died defending his principles, doing what he thought was right. That sounds like my son." Ted Blackwood's family expressed mixed emotions. The rivalry that had seemed so important, the research grant that had caused such tension, all seemed trivial now. Ted's sister spoke at a press conference. "Ted and Kevin pushed each other to be better scientists. It's heartbreaking that their dedication to proper research protocols, to doing things the right way, led to this tragedy." The 3rd student's family had maintained privacy throughout the years, rarely speaking publicly about their loss. They released a simple statement through their attorney. "We're grateful to the investigators who never gave up. Our child was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but they were trying to help a friend. That's how we choose to remember them." Lucas Harper was formally charged with 3 counts of second-degree murder. His lawyer argued for manslaughter charges, citing the unplanned nature of the deaths and Lucas's cooperation once confronted with evidence. The prosecutor maintained that regardless of intent, Lucas had killed 3 people and hidden the crimes for nearly 3 decades. The trial, held in Wyoming federal court, drew national attention. The unusual circumstances, the long delay, and the unique preservation of evidence made it a landmark case. Forensic experts testified about the film development process, the mineral evidence on the geology hammer, and the degradation patterns of the notebook pages. Morrison testified about the investigation, methodically presenting each piece of evidence. The photographs from Kevin's hidden canister were particularly powerful, showing Lucas watching the students throughout the day, contradicting his original claims of minimal interaction. Lucas's defense team didn't dispute the deaths, but argued for understanding the context. They presented evidence of Lucas's mental state in 1995, his family's history in the park, the economic desperation that led to using an expired permit. They called it a tragedy of errors, where each bad decision cascaded into worse ones. The jury deliberated for 3 days. They returned guilty verdicts on all 3 counts of second-degree murder. The judge, considering Lucas's age and the circumstances, sentenced him to 25 years to life in federal prison. Given his age and the time served in his self-imposed psychological prison, it was effectively a life sentence. During the sentencing, Lucas made a final statement. "I've relived July 15, 1995, every day since it happened. 3 young people with brilliant futures died because I couldn't accept losing my job. I don't ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I only hope their families can find some peace knowing the truth." The case's resolution led to changes in how the National Park Service handles permit violations and missing persons cases. The Kevin Martinez Memorial Research Grant was expanded, now supporting 3 students annually. The site where they disappeared was marked with a simple plaque noting the dangers of the area and memorializing the 3 students who lost their lives pursuing scientific knowledge. Patricia Chen retired from the Park Service shortly after testifying. She established a foundation promoting safety protocols for researchers in dangerous environments. "If my relationship with Kevin taught me anything," she said, "it's that life is fragile and unexpected. We need to protect those who push the boundaries of knowledge." The drought that had revealed the truth continued through 2024, exposing other long-hidden secrets throughout the park. But none captured public attention like the resolution of the 1995 disappearance. It served as a reminder that nature not only conceals, but sometimes, eventually, reveals. Lucas Harper's Idaho home was sold, with proceeds going to the victims' families as part of a civil settlement. The Yellowstone map from his wall, with all its markings, was donated to the park's museum, a chilling artifact of obsession and guilt. Visitors sometimes asked about it, leading to discussions about the case and its lessons. In the end, the case of the 3 missing geology students became more than just a true crime story. It became a cautionary tale about how small lies can spiral into tragedy, how momentary anger can destroy multiple lives, and how the pursuit of truth, whether in science or justice, sometimes demands a terrible price. The film canister that solved the case was preserved in the FBI's Cold Case Archive, a testament to Kevin Martinez's meticulous documentation habits. Even in his final moments, his commitment to recording evidence had ensured that the truth would eventually emerge. It just took 29 years and a historic drought to bring it to light. Morrison, reflecting on the case, noted something that stayed with her. Lucas Harper spent almost 3 decades free but imprisoned by his conscience. He kept newspaper clippings, wrote unsent letters, and never formed meaningful relationships. He was serving a life sentence long before we arrested him. Sometimes the greatest punishment isn't what the justice system imposes, but what we impose on ourselves. The families of the 3 students held a joint memorial service in 2025, 30 years after the tragedy. They met at Yellowstone, not at the site of the deaths, but at a peaceful overlook where they scattered symbolic ashes and shared memories. The Park Service closed the area to other visitors for 2 hours, allowing them privacy to grieve and find closure. The case entered true crime history as one of the most unusual cold case resolutions. Podcasts, documentaries, and articles examined how environmental changes could reveal long-hidden crimes. Climate scientists pointed to it as an unexpected consequence of global warming, while criminologists studied it as an example of how evidence preservation in extreme environments could aid future investigations. Lucas Harper began serving his sentence at age 52. Prison officials reported he was a model inmate, spending most of his time in the library, avoiding conflict, and declining most interview requests. He participated in a restorative justice program, writing letters of apology to the families, though whether they were ever read remained private. The West Yellowstone community, which had known Lucas for years, struggled with the revelation. Many remembered him as helpful and knowledgeable about the park. The cognitive dissonance of reconciling the neighbor they knew with the killer he'd been forced them to confront uncomfortable truths about how well we really know anyone. As this story concludes, it's worth noting that Yellowstone continues to hold secrets. The thermal features that destroyed evidence in this case have likely concealed other tragedies. But the resolution of the 1995 disappearance offers hope that truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of surfacing. Sometimes it just takes time, patience, and in this case, an unprecedented drought to wash away the lies and reveal what really happened on that July night when 3 young scientists met their fate around a campfire in one of America's most beautiful and dangerous places. The final truth is that Lucas Harper's desperate attempt to preserve his way of life had destroyed it completely. In trying to keep his illegal guide business, he'd lost his freedom, his identity, and his humanity. The 3 students died for their integrity, their commitment to truth and proper procedure. In the end, their dedication to documentation and evidence had ensured justice, even if delayed by nearly 3 decades. The campfire that had been overfueled to destroy evidence had failed in its purpose. Truth, like energy, can neither be created nor destroyed, only transformed and waiting for the right conditions to emerge.